Are you?
Just getting out of the shower. I know you weren't expecting that.
I wasn't, that's okay.
I was in the roof. That's why I'm still wet.
Oh, no.
Any earlier, and I would have still been in the shower.
Are you having roof problems?
I'm sorry.
No, just,
No, she's not
summer
here tonight.
thing.
Okay.
You know what I've learned is
So.
to go around the house, don't look at anything.
Yeah.
Because then every time you look, you find something and then you gotta pay someone to fix it. And I have not had it. I don't have a choice, so.
Sorry. And if I do some of this.
We have everybody.
Flooring stuff.
Oh, it's another thing, yeah, no, in a second. I saw.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah. Stylish as well.
I do make that.
Oh, got one here.
Oh, thanks.
I've got more.
I've got hundreds of them. Haven't I given you?
My daughter stole the ones you gave
Oh,
me.
good, I got
She goes,
some.
these are really nice. I got them.
They're-
Okay.
There you go.
Did anybody from Mount Vernon call you?
Right.
Did anybody from Mount Vernon call you? Cause I passed on all the info and.
No, I haven't heard. Yeah, they went out.
Oh, okay.
I don't wanna say I'm figurehead.
I get
I'm
it.
not sure.
Okay, I got it.
But I hope that you do. We could get it. Machine adds levels.
Yeah, well, I gave the info and.
It's okay, Jack. I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's confusing.
Every session can do.
I know. We should have carpool.
It's a good time to be in the gyms, I mean.
Yeah. Say that.
Hey, let's go ahead and call to order the redevelopment commission for the 22nd of July. Stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. Hello, can you call the roll?
Mr. Fruin, Mr. Brand,
Here.
Mr. Wolski,
Here.
Mr. Carroll,
Here.
Ms. Freeman. Here. That's four constitutes quorum.
Okay, considerations of the meeting from May 27th.
I don't think I was there anyway.
No. We did not have much to go over.
No. But do we need a motion to approve the minutes? I'll make the same motion to approve the May minutes.
Need a second? Second. Okay, we have motion to, and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved. Minutes approved. Any claims?
No,
No. Financial report?
good distance last month, so I didn't print it for you.
Okay. Old business,
Nothing,
new business,
none.
okay. Take it away.
Somebody.
Very challenging for this.
Yeah. There's the last item.
Yeah, so our focus tonight is gonna be your annual training, and so Cam is gonna lead us in that tonight.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening, Cam Starnes with Tab Log. Some of you are familiar because I did this last year in October. So if this is a review, I apologize, but I think at least one of you is new.
No, I might not have been in. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so it's good to go over just the basics of what a redevelopment commission is, how you function, kind of the role across the town enterprise as a whole. The redevelopment commission is somewhat unique body relative to other town boards and commissions in that you have a fair amount of tools and autonomy in how you use that. to further the mission of the redevelopment commission as stated by statute, which is to promote economic development and redevelopment of the town. So that's what you're all charged with, well, been appointed by either the town executive, the town council president, or the council. To this commission. And, you know, there's plenty of basic mechanics that you have in front of you in the summary that we've provided about qualifications. You'll have to be 18 years of age, so if you might have not qualified, like you have to, you can discreetly say that later, we don't have to replace you, but you're all have to be bonded and sworn and all those good things in terms of taking office. But now that this has been created, the redevelopment commission is created as authorized by statute, but created by an ordinance adopted by the town. I don't know when that was adopted, it was before my time of having the privilege to work with the town of Cumberland, but at some point in the past, the town council adopting an ordinance, they created a Department of Redevelopment that's governed by the redevelopment. So that's really the setup is for you to be the decision-making body as it pertains to economic development and redevelopment initiatives of the town, which are most often led by staff. There are points at which the legislative body, I think that's what has the authority to. You need their approval as well, typically when it comes to certain real estate obligations, but primarily as pertains to debt obligations that you would adhere to as a commission. So keep that in mind, that there are touch points with the council where the statute says you have to go ask them as well, but there's a lot that you can authorize in and of yourselves as the redevelopment thing. Basics on your meetings and rules, like any other board or commission. The state law is pretty prescriptive. I don't have to tell you all have been at this for any amount of time. Municipalities are pretty heavily regulated by the state and by the legislature, and redevelopment commissions are certainly not an exception. You are a public body, your meetings are subject to door law, and the records of the commission are subject to APRA, the Public Records Act, from the end. So keep in mind, even though this is a, like I mentioned, a unique body in terms of its authority and the range of its defined with, as you will, it's still a public entity, has to conduct itself like other boards and commissions of the town and otherwise in terms of how you transact business, making your decisions in public meetings, and avoiding things like serial communications, where you're having one-off conversations with the intent to not create a public meeting, where you would have a quorum present and therefore have to post notice and allow the public to attend. There are also some specific rules as it pertains to not creating some kind of hidden run around that process. And your communications and any documents that you handle while wearing the hat of a redevelopment commissioner or a public record subject to public record request. So, and sometimes we were talking about projects or prospective projects, and you might be privy to some sensitive information related to maybe the quantitative details of a proposed project. Keep in mind that that's part and parcel of what you do here as commissioners is something that you have in your possession by virtue of your service on this commission would be public and subject record. Same with your emails and communications that will take SARS. Want to make sure that you know that. The statute requires an annual organizational meeting to meet in May and elect officers. Have that decision, so that's simple enough. President, vice president, secretary serve until a successor is elected by the board itself. The fiscal officer, you'll notice there's not a treasurer. The fiscal officer by statute is the clerk treasurer. So that person serves the commission in his or her capacity, whoever that elected is, as that fiscal officer, and has certain duties and responsibilities to the commission to keep its books and also to report to it on an annual basis as to the status of its accounts. And present and the duty to present claims for approval and things of that nature. So another kind of touch point with the town enterprise as a whole between the towns and development. I noticed you didn't have any claims this evening, but typically if there are contracts or other things to be payable from the REC's accounts, which are separate, you are your own fiscal body as an instrumentality at tax district. Then those will be presented to you as claims approved if that tells the clerk treasurer to pay them. Mechanically, just like some other types of boards and commissions. You'll be just on an as needed basis. You don't have a regularly scheduled meeting.
We have a regularly scheduled meeting. If there's no business, we meet kind of every other month to pay bills.
You have pretty broad authority under statute to set that up however you want, keeping in mind that any meeting that you do have is a public meeting. I've not actually had, most of my practice involves redevelopment commissions, and I've yet to have one actually adopt sort of bylaws. I've heard of it a couple of times, but statute says you can. If you really wanted to have bylaws, more rules than you already have by virtue of state statute, you can do that. I just wanted you to be aware. We talked a little bit on the front end about the duties of the commission. That's again specified by statute: investigate and seek to remedy the causes of areas in need of redevelopment in the town, promote the highest and best use of the land, and cooperate with the town to best serve the youth. So it's baked in there that cooperation with private enterprise is encouraged in how you go about carrying out those duties. It's not all a public-led thing by design. Redevelopment Commission is set up to engage in public-private partnerships, P3 arrangements as we call them, where there may be some action for the REC to take in connection with, in concert with a private entity to bring about some kind of project that meets the overall goals of the town. So that's often where the decision points come with regard to redevelopment commissions is how to engage in that type of a transaction and how that's structured in a way that's accomplishing the goals of the REC and the town as a whole and protecting the town and the redevelopment commission moving forward. There are several annual requirements of the commission that are required by statute. We have allocation areas here
We have
that
one.
you oversee, one allocation area. So that we'll get into a little bit. You're all familiar, I believe, but we'll get in a little bit to allocation areas as the primary tool of the Redevelopment Commission, but most of the reporting requirements that exist in statute, just as a mechanical function, are related to your allocation areas and the revenues that are captured there and how those are programmed and accounted for. And we know that anything that's captured in an allocation area, including all property tax revenue captured there, is cordoned off from what would otherwise go to overlapping tax. Statute requires that by June 15th of each year, you make a determination about whether or not you want to pass through any of that, including also assessed value, to the overlapping tax units. That's libraries, that's fire territories, that's schools, that's the town itself. So that's to do. Make
did
that
that
decision
in
in May.
Yep.
If you're familiar with how that goes, that's just one of the statutory requirements. There's also an annual TIF report has to be compiled and adopted that says, here's our books, basically. And typically part of that is, here are our priorities, how we intend to utilize the resources that we've collected, these revenues from allocation. Is part of that. There is, we'll probably talk about this a little bit in October, there's now a requirement to adopt a 5-year spending plan. There was a lot of noise about those when the statute passed. Couple sessions ago. And I think more evidence that redevelopment commissions are continue to be an area where there's no shortage of legislative activity for better or worse. And a lot of politics around the topic. That was a additional requirement kind of stuck on the redevelopment commissions that I think in practice turned out to be not quite as bad as it sounded like it was going to be. Any spending that you do has to be consistent with that 5-year plan. But those were, I've not seen yours, but you're incentivized to make it fairly broad. And provided that you did, they can be amended, but 2, I think there has been less sort of work or trouble in complying with those plans than people initially thought when they read the statute. So keep in mind that that's an ongoing requirement. But it's something that staff and municipal advisors can typically put together. It just kind of exists in parallel with your economic development plans for your allocation here. You talked a little bit about powers you have, they're listed here. Just as any, just for example, you can acquire and dispose of real property and enter into contracts or partnership agreements. There is you're a taxing district, you can levy a special benefits tax. That requires legislative body, fiscal body approval by council, but there is, you are a taxing unit yourself. That's a civic tax. Also uncommon because nobody wants to raise taxes, but that's a power that you have. And various other planning functions that you can do. You can also designate economic development areas, redevelopment areas, and allocation areas, which gets us into the role of TIF, which is often the real kind of crux of what redevelopment commissions are formed to do. You have an allocation area, so you know what that means by some form or fashion, but I still like stealing an example that somebody gave me once. If we assume that this iPad is a parcel of real property, we know it has an assessed value, even if it's undeveloped, it's flat. It could be agricultural, it doesn't necessarily have to be, it doesn't have any buildings on it. It still has an assessed value as land. And that value times your effective tax rate gets paid to the treasurer, gets divided up across the various taxing units that have property tax levies. Like we talked about earlier, the library, the school, town. That, say it's worth $1, that dollar gets multiplied by the rate and generates, let's say, 25 cents in property tax revenue. That gets split up, and maybe 6 cents goes to the town, and 5 cents goes to the schools, and 2 cents goes to the libraries, etc. If you go through the steps that are closely prescribed by statute, and you have an allocation area, you've been through them, declaratory resolution, planning commission order, and the town council resolution, public hearing, confirmatory resolution. You say this parcel is now an economic development area and an allocation area. So that means from that point in the future, anything new, that any growth in revenue from this parcel will be captured by the redevelopment commission, not for those other applications. So by virtue of doing that, and then a building comes about on that parcel, these improvements, if you look at a property record card, you see land value, improvements value. These improvements will be assessed. They'll be taxed at the effective tax rate. Those revenues don't go to those overlapping units, they come here. That is your revenue stream that you either utilize as cash in accordance with statutory provisions, that say, here's what you can spend it on. And they're typically limited to infrastructure that serves or benefits this area that it doesn't need. Where you can pledge those revenues over time to repayment of bonds in exchange for a lump sum of funds to be utilized to, say, you needed to build a road to connect this parcel to adjacent infrastructure to make this building possible in the first place. That creates that circular type of deal structure that is really kind of the classic use of tax export financing. I don't know if you've done TIF bonds. So then you've seen that process in action. There is plenty of opportunity for complication as that comes together, because that one parcel could be multiple parcels, you can have benefits phased over time. You can structure these bonds in a number of different ways that may involve just pledging that revenue, or could involve pledging other revenues to credit against the bonds. And there's plenty of permutations of what that deal could look like. You're also typically entering into some kind of public-private partnership with whoever is looking to develop and build this building in the first place, to say that building you said you're gonna build, you have to do it, and here's the guarantee you need, and here's the timeline, and here's what happens if it doesn't get built, and all those various scenarios that have to be documented in that type of. Those are all within the powers and authorities of the Redevelopment Commission, and generate, potential decisions for you all to make in the best interest of the town, which is what you are tasked with. Plenty of other, technical aspects of what it is and how it works, but I think at that point, given the overview, it's, glad to answer any questions you have, going into more detail on areas that, you want to hear about, that covers the basics. So we'll gladly open it up to whatever you all want to talk about further, if any.
I think we've done quite a bit already.
Okay.
We started in 2009. In January as the redevelopment commission.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of training, and then we have recently gone through the TIF process. With an apartment complex just down the street. So. I'm glad we're moving.
Yes.
There for a while, it was like nothing's going on, it was just standstill, so.
The tools are there, it takes. And like I mentioned, the statute encourages partnership with private enterprise. And it does, and that is typically the way that projects like the apartment complex come about, but that it takes two parties. You gotta also, through the, relationship with the town, sort of be in a position to respond when those things come in, and there's not a lot of way to directly control when that happens. Bit of a markup function, and then also, that the decisions we made about what's in the best interest of the town won't make sense.
So right now we have the economic development area set up to be, it's just in Hancock County along US 40, kind of Carroll Road to Mount Comfort Road, with the allocation area of the single site, capturing the apartments there at the hub at Pensy Trail. And so those buildings, they finally are starting to have some occupancy, so we should start seeing some revenue. If not later this year, next year. And you guys committed 80% of the revenues toward those bonds, and then 20% will be retained for the redevelopment commission to use. So as we start having funds, then we can start looking back at the plan that we set and the different projects that need to happen in the area to see if there's things that make sense along there. So that's kind of what you have existing. And then there's a couple of projects longer term that may come before you. And one in that same economic development area The other projects we're working on is outside the economic development area, so. Just things that we'll have to. Kind of, it's easier to address it as the projects actually come in and work through those steps and schedules, but we wanna make sure that you understand the process. And just kind of your role in it. Every year as we get into training.
And those revenues, when they're realized, will be a year in arrears, isn't that right?
Yep.
Like all other taxes,
Yes,
property taxes.
correct. Correct, yeah, and your guys' portion is 20%, so, more than likely, a little bit of cash accrue to pay for a project. Or if, the fire department or the schools or someone has a project that they wanna bring forward, if it fits within the scope of what was in that plan, those are things that you could consider too.
The other thing being, if the 80% has been pledged to the bonds. You started what you're being in Indiana would call the shot clock of 25 years on the life of that allocation. So that 20%. Yes, when we have this lovely payment in arrears property tax system, and the delay is kind of the capture of that revenue as to once it's fully assessed. Then the next year you really start to see the revenue come in, but it will only be for that amount of time, so the planning on. Projecting out how much that is ultimately gonna be versus the cost of the projects that are in the plan that you wanna do. Will be an important analysis to undertake, to see those. Come in semi-annually with property tax payments.
Have the forecasts been sort of in line with what we had expected? No
Yeah, I mean,
surprise.
we haven't had any revenue come in yet, but we also haven't expected any revenue to come
Right.
in.
I'm just wondering if
Yeah.
market values have dramatically improved.
Yeah, so we'll
Decline.
have to see, I think it's too soon to really tell. But if they do come in higher, you've still only committed that 80% up to an amount. So they could potentially pay those bonds off early, which a lot, and then you guys would have, if the revenues come in higher than what we predicted. You guys did put a max on your
Right,
commitment, then your 20% could end up being more than.
right, but the other side could be. But, it realized if they came in lower than what we thought, we might not get the 20% because we spent.
You committed 80% up to kind of a certain amount, so,
Oh, okay, so that's our
So you should-
downside,
yeah, the
Oh.
downside is the revenues just might be lower than what we anticipated.
right?
But you still would likely, receive revenues. It'd have to be a severe.
Okay.
Change, cause I think your guys' piece of that over 25 years.
The
is like
bondholders get the first slice, right?
Not
It
necessarily.
depends, I was gonna say, it depends.
It's often that type of gift fund structure is often a lesser of 80% or actual debt service semi-annually. So that the bonds will have an amortization schedule that calls for semi-annual debt service payments that correlate with the semi-annual tax payments. So usually it's February and August, and make tax payments in May and November, so that it gives time for that to be reconciled and go out. But I don't know that I've seen the indenture for these bonds, so and there are multiple ways to do this, but it sounds like. We've got a lesser of 80% or actual debt service pledge, so if. Assessed values are lower than projected, then you may get to that 80% and it may be short of the debt service payment, which is the risk. That the bondholder has to this requirement.
Yeah. And the developer bought the bonds in this case, so they assume that risk if it comes in
Honestly.
under.
The,
And the way the debt schedule works, like 80% of that is going to them, and you guys will get a little bit of revenue that's gonna kind of build here.
I was gonna say, from where we stood, what, now, a couple of years ago, it seems, to the realization of this project, I've been very impressed by both the quality and the architecture. I mean, just from what I can tell, I don't think I'm gonna move in, but but it's appealing.
Mhm.
And I wish them the very best of luck, of course. And it looks like the market is improving for renters.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they've had several move-ins already. I think all but 2 of the buildings have occupancy permits. So I mean, yeah, they're moving according to their schedule. It's gone fairly smoothly. Things like that, so.
There's supposed to be some single family.
The townhomes are under construction along the trail.
Okay.
And, the first group of occupancy permits, if they weren't issued today, are gonna be issued, or should be issued tomorrow. I just saw this afternoon status changes on, several of the townhomes, I believe. So. Those will be fully constructed by end of the year.
Oh.
So, they'll be moving into their third phase, which is that commercial piece out front, which we did not put in the allocation area, so that way it would continue to go to the tax rolls.
The property that we purchased, a corner of 640
Mhm.
on the northwest. Is there any movement on that?
Yeah, so you guys did a grant to the Cumberland Community Development Corporation so that they could acquire 31 acres down there at Mount Comfort in US 40 on the northwest corner. They are negotiating with a developer right now, to start a due diligence period. They would be looking at, taking down the whole acreage in 2 phases. The vision down there is an entertainment district, so restaurants, things to do, upper story multifamily, things like that. So, the market's a little strange at the moment. Go with strange. It's a little iffy. And so, a 6-month due diligence period is what we've been looking on, so they can run through feasibility of the plan. There's some financing things on their end, as well as just kind of work through some engineering design elements to see if the project will pencil.
What we had before is,
That's the concept they're building on.
okay,
So fine tuning, and they'll take that, and the community development corporations kind of tweaked a little bit more. And then, so now the developer, the vision's still very similar. And there's a neighboring parcel as well as a couple other builders that want to get in to phase 2, but they want phase 1 off the ground first. To kind of prove the market, so we can get this part going, then you'll see a lot more activity down. On that corner.
that singular corner is still being negotiated. Or are we just, as you said, we're working with the individual.
The Community Development Corporation owns the land, so they're working through, they're negotiating on there as far as a due diligence period that would move toward a purchase if the due diligence period proved a project was feasible.
Where that one gas station was supposed to be.
So that owner is part of this, and so that would be one of the items that the developer would be working on was. To acquire that piece. The town wouldn't be acquiring it, or the CDC, neither of us have the funds to do that. But. So, yeah. So it is moving, just a little slower, with the market right now.
That sounds like a good thing then.
Yep. So.
Do you have any questions?
Well, and I'll make a motion and we adjourn.
Okay,
But everything's.
thank you for being here.
Of course.
For our training.
Nice seeing you again.
You as well, glad to run through the basics here. Glad to answer any questions you have as you proceed. Don't hesitate to reach out to me, respond. Here for you guys.
So second motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Do you need a second?
I also.
You have a motion, a second to adjourn, all in favor, say aye.
Uh,
Aye. Those, they're adjourned. So, September?
September 15th.
No August meeting. So yes, as of now.